Am I the a-hole for not forgiving my best friend, 31M, after he cheated with my fiancée, 29F, and then asked me to be his best man? I, 33M, was on top of the world. After 7 years with my fiancée, Lily, 29F, we were on the brink of the life we'd always dreamed of. I had finally proposed last spring under the stars at the place where we had our first date. She cried and said yes, and in that moment, it felt like every decision I'd made had led to something perfect. Our wedding planning was well underway, and my childhood best friend, Dave, 31M, was to be my best man. Dave was like family to me. We grew up together, survived school together, celebrated each other's milestones. I had never needed a brother because Dave was it. But now, it's hard for me to even remember those days with anything other than bitterness. About 3 months before the wedding, I noticed some subtle shifts. Lily was more distant, always busy, and our conversations felt different, off. I wrote it off as pre-wedding stress. Weddings are intense, right? It was the logical explanation, and I wasn't one to pry. I trusted her, and I trusted Dave. I never once considered they'd do anything to hurt me. I mean, Lily and I were building a life together, and Dave and I had each other's backs since kindergarten. But everything I thought I knew came crashing down in one night. It was an ordinary Thursday, and I was working late when my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it, expecting spam or maybe an old friend reaching out. What I found were messages and photos, dozens of them, showing Lily and Dave in private moments meant only for partners. My heart stopped. There they were, holding hands in hidden places, smiling at each other with a familiarity that no best friend should have with your fiancé. Then there were explicit messages between them, ones I can barely bring myself to think about, detailing plans to meet up when I was out of town. At first, I was in denial. My brain tried to twist reality, telling me it was some cruel joke. I thought, maybe someone was trying to break us apart. But deep down, I knew it was real. I could see the truth in their eyes in those photos, in the way they looked at each other. A cold, nauseating feeling settled in my gut as I realized the woman I loved, the woman I'd spent years with, and the man I trusted most, had been carrying on this affair for nearly a year. I barely remember the next few hours. I was numb, just staring at my phone until sunrise. Finally, I confronted Lily. She crumbled immediately, sobbing, telling me it had been a mistake that spiraled and just happened, as if they had no control over themselves. I couldn't look at her, couldn't find any trace of the woman I thought I knew. When I went to confront Dave, he acted inconvenienced, as though he were embarrassed for me. His apology was hollow, just the same empty words, telling me he was sorry and didn't want this to ruin our friendship. I left without saying much because I wasn't ready to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I packed a bag, left our home, and went to stay with my brother for a while. I spent weeks in a fog, unable to process how my entire life had shattered. Friends reached out, asking if I was okay, but I just wanted space to grieve in private. Then, just as I began to pick up the pieces, I received another message from Dave, asking to meet up. He said he wanted to clear the air and talk things over. Against my better judgment, I agreed. I thought, maybe, he was finally ready to take accountability. But instead, he hit me with the last thing I expected: he and Lily were getting married. He went on about how their connection had been undeniable, and they didn't want to hide anymore. And then, in a tone I can only describe as smug, he asked me to be his best man. His reasoning? He said it was my chance to prove I'd forgiven them, that we were still family and that he'd always want me in his life. He even had the audacity to say he'd understand if I couldn't handle it. I didn't say a word. I just turned and walked away, feeling a numbness even deeper than before. Since then, I cut both of them out of my life entirely. I blocked them on social media, ignored their texts, and pulled away from any mutual friends who wouldn't understand my need for distance. But now, some of those friends have started to criticize me. They say I'm holding a grudge and being petty. They talk about how I need to let go of the past and move on, as though my pain were some minor inconvenience I could brush aside. One friend even tried to guilt-trip me, saying, "Come on, he's like your brother." I knew I needed closure, but not the kind they expected. I decided to attend their wedding reception, but I had something in mind. They had no idea I'd be there, but I'd heard they were hosting the reception at a local event hall, so I went. I dressed in my sharpest suit and arrived just after dinner, when everyone was mingling and dancing. I blended into the crowd, catching sight of them, Lily in her white dress, laughing as Dave held her close, both of them looking as if nothing had ever happened. As the DJ called for speeches, I seized my moment. I stepped up to the microphone, and people started to cheer, clearly thinking I was going to give some sweet, heartfelt toast. I started by talking about the friendship I'd had with Dave, the loyalty I thought we'd shared, and the life I had planned with Lily. As I continued, it became clear to everyone that this wasn't the speech they'd expected. In a calm, even voice, I explained exactly what Dave and Lily had done, how they'd betrayed my trust and shattered my life. Gasps filled the room, and both of their faces went pale. They stammered, tried to interrupt, but I kept going, laying out the truth in front of all their family and friends. When I finished, I raised a glass and toasted to loyalty, honesty, and to finding out who truly cares about you. Then I left, feeling lighter than I had in months. Since then, I've heard whispers about how awkward and tense their wedding became after that. Some friends have even reached out to apologize, acknowledging that they were wrong to pressure me. I finally felt some closure, knowing I took back control in a situation where I'd been made to feel powerless. So, Reddit, maybe I'm still the asshole to some people, but I finally got the peace I needed.
Am I the a-hole for punching my ex-husband's new girlfriend for hitting my daughter? I, 23F, had my daughter, Emma, when I was 17. I thought I had it all figured out back then. I got married to Devin, her father, at 18, and we tried to make things work for a couple of years before everything fell apart. Devin cheated, so we divorced when I was 20, and I've been raising Emma on my own ever since. Devin, meanwhile, barely lifts a finger. He doesn't pay a cent for Emma, sees her once a month if I'm lucky, and only when I practically beg him. I shouldn't have to beg him to be a father, but it's the reality I live with. Recently, Devin got into a relationship with a woman named Haley. She's been nothing but toxic toward me and, worse, toward Emma. From the start, Haley made nasty comments, saying my daughter's autism was my fault. She claimed it was because I coddle her. Let me be clear, I do everything I can for my daughter. Emma was diagnosed with autism at 4 and has developmental delays, and we're in this together. She's in speech therapy, behavioral therapy, and sees a therapist twice a week. I work with her every day on her speech, her behavior, anything to help her thrive. Haley doesn't know anything about us, but that hasn't stopped her from passing judgment. Yesterday, Emma was supposed to spend the night at Devin's. He had begged me to let her come over, saying he wanted to bond more. I agreed, thinking maybe he was finally taking an interest in her life. But a few hours into the night, Devin called me, saying Emma was upset and asking me to pick her up. I could tell by his tone that something was off. When I got there, I was horrified by what I saw. Emma had red marks, welts, and bruises all over her legs. I could feel my blood boiling as I asked her what happened. She told me she had accidentally spilled water on the floor and the couch, and Haley had flipped out. Emma said Haley hit her with a belt. The thought of anyone laying a hand on my little girl, especially over something so trivial, made me see red. I stormed into the house. I don't even remember making the decision, my body moved on instinct. I found Haley in the living room, and before I could think twice, my fist connected with her face. I let all of my anger and frustration pour out. I didn't even realize what I'd done until I saw Haley on the floor, dazed and bleeding. Haley screamed that she was going to press charges, but Devin managed to talk her out of it. I didn't stick around to hear any more. I scooped Emma into my arms, got in the car, and drove straight to the police station. I filed a police report, showing them Emma's bruises and marks, and pressed charges against Haley for child abuse. I also reported Devin to CPS for child neglect and abuse, knowing full well I had to do everything possible to protect Emma. I took photos of every mark on my daughter's legs and arms. I was shaken, angry, but mostly devastated for Emma. I decided then and there that I'd never let Emma go back to her father's house again. I spent hours that night replaying everything in my head, feeling guilty for ever letting her stay there. How could I have known Haley was capable of this? But that guilt only fueled my determination. I realized that if I couldn't protect my daughter's safety there, I'd make sure she never had to go back. Weeks later, I found out that Haley had indeed tried to press charges against me. But Devin was afraid that if the incident went public, it would complicate the case with CPS, and he managed to dissuade her. In the meantime, my CPS report had serious consequences. Not only was Devin ordered to stay away from Emma, but his custody was revoked, and he was slapped with neglect charges. Haley, however, didn't get off so easy. She was charged with child abuse and eventually found guilty. The judge ordered her to complete anger management classes and community service, and she was prohibited from being around any minor without supervision. The best part? Devin had to deal with the fallout of his girlfriend's actions. With the charges on his record and CPS watching him closely, he lost the reputation he once held, and friends and family finally saw him for who he was. I feel no guilt about what I did to Haley. She laid hands on my daughter, and I defended her the way any mother would. So, Reddit, maybe some people would call me an asshole, but I can sleep at night knowing my daughter will never be at the mercy of those two ever again.
Am I the a-hole for telling my vegan friend I don't want to come over for Thanksgiving dinner? Not the a-hole. I, 34F, have a friend, 35F, who went vegan 10 years ago. We've been friends 20 years or more. We have a large group of friends 15 to 20, and there are a few of us that switch off cooking dinner on Thanksgiving for whoever is in town. Since and went vegan, we've always accommodated her dietary restrictions with at the very least some tofurkey, one side dish and one dessert being strictly vegan. This year and jumped in early and for the first time ever said she wanted to cook Thanksgiving this year. Not a problem. Until she informed us in the group chat dinner will be 100% vegan. Some of us offered to bring more omnivore offerings, including a turkey, and she insisted we eat vegan while at her house. She declared that vegan food tastes exactly the same as omnivore food. It does not. I've been to her house and choked down bean burgers and chocolate cake and probably a dozen other meals, each of which she insisted tasted just like the real thing. She even tried to fool me once with a Beyond Burger, insisting it was a regular hamburger. I have only found a limited number of vegan dishes I enjoy, and none of them have ever been made by her. After thinking it over and discussing it with my husband, we decided to privately tell her we were bowing out of dinner on Thanksgiving this year. I told her I wanted turkey, mashed potatoes, pumpkin pie that were made with traditional ingredients. I could have lied and said we had plans to travel to see family, but I don't want lie. And has become angrier and angrier with me since I told her this about a week ago. Then she went and complained to some of the women in our group about me refusing to attend just because she's cooking. Which is sort of true, but still made me angry. So I ended explaining to the other ladies that we all very considerately make vegan dishes just for her at every party and get together any of us throw, and it's really unreasonable for her to insist that I strictly adhere to her dietary choices when I have never demanded the same from her. So that blew up because all the ladies have now jumped to my way of thinking and decided they will have Thanksgiving at one of their houses instead. We will not be attending their Thanksgiving either. My husband says we probably should have lied about going out of town, or at the very least I should have not explained my reasoning to the other ladies. I've decided to stay out of it from here on out, but somehow Anna blames me for the whole debacle. AITA for declining to attend a vegan Thanksgiving?